All right. Peace and greetings, YouTubers. So welcome to another edition of In the News. Let's just jump right into it. I want to start with Verzuz. And before I even get to Anthony Hamilton and Musiq Soulchild, can I tell y'all the beef that I have with Verzuz? And if you followed me for a while, you kind of already know where I stand on this. And so I've been very transparent about the fact that, honestly, I'm Verzuz'd out, right? I'm kind of done with Verzuz. However, because I love black music, I love to celebrate artistry, I love the stories, the milestones, the accolades, I love all of it, the camaraderie, the idea of connecting with other people who also love the music you enjoy. That's the reason why I still support Verzuz. And so it came to a shock to me when I saw that they were attempting to start making people pay to watch Verzuz, where you would have to subscribe and you could get the 14-day free trial, and then you'd have to start paying. And I'm like, paying for what? I'm confused. We're paying for Verzuz? Because no disrespect, it's not like y'all have a Verzuz episode coming out 2 or 3 times a week. It's like, it's kind of sporadic. It's about as sporadic as I make videos on this channel. So what the nerve to want to start charging people? And so my thing is, I feel that what initially brought people to Verzuz and what made Verzuz work in the beginning was the fact that it wasn't so commercialized. It felt very authentic. You saw different entertainers or producers from the comfort of their home or their studio or their kitchen or wherever, literally on Instagram Live, on their cell phones, and they're having these great just powwows about music. And oh, remember that time we were in the studio and we did 512 takes of this song, and then we ended up using the very first take and we laughed about it for 2 months, and then the label didn't even want the song, we snuck and put it out anyway and it went to #1. Like, all of those different stories and anecdotes and accolades and all that stuff like that, those are the things that make people enjoy something like a Verzuz. And the fact that when Verzuz first dropped, we were in the middle of what was the pandemic's kickoff, right? So we had the stay-at-home orders. Everybody's a little paranoid. Nobody really knows what's happening in the world. And so in that moment, while the world was chaotic, it was the music that brought people into a space of serenity, or a space of just feeling like, okay, we're gonna be all right. And so in those moments where you had that space where you felt like you could almost be connected to some of your favorite entertainers, they seemed like they were just like a click away. They seemed like they were just a scroll away. They seemed a little bit more down to earth. And so everybody felt like, oh, we kind of almost have a closer connection to some of our favorite entertainers, so on and so forth. It just came from a very authentic place, and it was just a lot of fun. And so now it's turned into something that's been so commercialized. And I knew once they started having the Doritos sponsorships and the Ciroc all on the tape, I was like, oh, this is about to start changing around here. All right. And then they just started adding so many other things that people didn't ask for. And so, you want to just watch the Verzuz, but the entertainers, they're not going to be out for about an hour and a half because you got to sit through the rap cipher. I'm like, why is there a rap cipher on a Shaka Khan and Stephanie Mills Verzuz? This ain't even the same crowd. Or the DJ cipher, and they just add all this stuff. It's like sitting through the church announcements. And so the step team got to come out, and then they got to do the baby baptisms, and then they got some more announcements because it's pastor's anniversary service. And then after that, they got some politician that comes out there and tells y'all to remember to vote. I'm like, we just want to hear the songs. It's already a Tuesday. We all got to go to work in the morning. Y'all playing around. It started about 10:45. This thing ain't started yet. And so it's like y'all just sucked all the life out of what it once was. And I understand the idea of wanting to monetize and build a brand off of things that are great, but also recognize what it is that the people want. And you would think that as you see that the views get lower and lower over time, they would restructure how they do Verzuz. But it's kind of like, they're like, nope, we F all that. We just gonna do what we want. And so it's not even as enjoyable. It's like, give the people what they ask for. And really, people didn't ask for much. People were fine with just the idea of Verzuz being from people's houses and stuff. Once they started adding the staging and the DJs and all that, I get it. I understand wanting to polish the brand and make it present it even better. But if you're gonna do that, then go all the way out or sit down. Like, if you're gonna do a full out Verzuz with all that, then I expect to see a full 8-piece band, background singers, sound checks. The entertainers better have that earpiece in and actually use the mics that are appropriate for vocalists if you want to start charging people to watch this thing. Because really, if we want to be honest, Verzuz is pretty much like some C-grade karaoke with your favorite entertainers. And I say C-grade because it's not like they're performing the full songs. They get about a minute to perform some songs, sometimes 30 seconds. They get to pick and choose whether or not they want to sing or not, and they move on. And like I said, it's usually not the best sound quality because they're using, it's almost like the club appearance DJ material as far as the microphones and the PA system, as opposed to what you'd use in a concert setting. So a lot of times the singers go on there sounding a hot mess sometimes, and it's just a different kind of energy. Y'all just doing stuff that people didn't ask for. It's kind of like when your family gets together, right? and the family gets together, and sometimes the family will do those big giant meals. Maybe it's Easter, maybe it's the holiday season or something, and all the relatives normally have something that they bring that people are anticipating and they're ready to indulge in. And so when there are certain dishes that are very acquire and require a designated skill set, so maybe the mac and cheese or the potato salad or the banana pudding, certain things like that, they're usually delegated to a certain relative, and that relative knows that when they bring that dish, they're gonna bring what the people ask for. This is not gonna be the time to experiment and try something new. You do that on a random Tuesday, all right? That's the random Tuesday experiment when somebody was at the house. Oh, try this, tell me how this tastes. You don't bring this to the Sunday meal when everybody's hungry, you playing around. You know what I mean? And so I kind of feel like that's what Verzuz has turned into. I'm like, dang, and it's just like, I don't know. I'm over it. It's just, I get the idea of wanting to build a brand and make the business. I understand, but it's like the energy of Verzuz is so different now. It's not even enjoyable sometimes. I still love the music. I still love the artists, but all the behind the scenes and just the logistics, it's a turn off. Okay. I already said, we're going to get to a point in society where you're going to dial 911 and you're going to have to sit through an ad before you get help. Like you're going to literally be in the house. The killer is in the house, coming up the stairs. You in the closet trying to explain to the dispatch where you're at. You know, I'm in the room. I'm in the room. And then while you're talking out of nowhere, the State Farm commercial comes out. What? I'm in the room. Jake? What you? Huh? And they didn't tell you it's like a 30-second ad. You got to sit through it. Like I can see that happening. But anyway, to the actual verses, because I went on my little soapbox here. Anthony Hamilton, Musiq Soulchild. I didn't get a chance to watch all of it because I was multitasking at the same time. But, you know, it was cool for what it was. I enjoyed both of their catalogs. Music did sound a little off, I'm not going to lie. But I don't know if that was, like I said, because they also, I don't think the equipment is appropriate for vocalists. Like, even the setup, it doesn't add up. If you were going to have something like a Musiq Soulchild and an Anthony Hamilton, wouldn't you have a more intimate kind of setup because they make this very beautiful R&B music that's very subtle and romantic? Why is it like we at a club? Like it's a club appearance or something. Okay. I mean, you know, Anthony Hamilton's about to sing, you know, her heart. But okay, you say so. But no, I enjoyed both of their catalogs. So it was fun to kind of hear all those songs. Growing up, I probably leaned a lot more towards Musiq Soulchild in middle and high school, and then kind of shifted to Anthony Hamilton when I got to college. Like middle and high school was interesting because I remember, if you follow my podcast, I had the episode about learning how to drive. The episode's called Pull Over So I Can Hit You. But long story short, learning to drive was not the best experience for me. My parents were very chaotic and the drive school was trash. And so I used to just steal my car and teach myself how to drive. And so around that time, there were a handful of albums that were out. And so it was like Brandy's Aphrodisiac, Musiq Soulchild, Soul Star. I want to say Teacher Moses, Complex Simplicity, and a few other ones that kind of always kept me like here. And so I used to put those albums on when I would go and steal my car and drive all around until I got better. And so those albums just were like really smooth. As far as a favorite Musiq Soulchild song, that's a hard one. He has a lot of really great ones. I guess out of the singles, it was probably For the Night or Who Knows. I also like the song Soul Star or Miss You as well. He has some great material now that I think about it. I always loved this one song he had that sampled LL Cool J's Jigglin' Baby. I forgot what the title of it is, but that was always really fun, up-tempo. And then as I got into college, it was Anthony Hamilton. That me and Anthony clicked. He's still one of my favorites right now, but I used to play the mess out of The Point of It All and Please Stay. Like, I was depressed at the time. I had got dumped, so I was in my feelings. And so I used to just be in the room with the lights off, all in the dark, and just have them songs playing. Because, you know, Anthony Hamilton knows how to beg on his songs. So I just be in there just going through it. But that was always a really great album. And then I even like the Praying For You song. Kind of churchy. That was fun. His 2016 album was really good, too. I forgot what it was called, but it's the one that has, like, Amen and Never Letting Go and Take You Home and Walk in My Shoes was a good one. Walk in My Shoes, I Want You, because, you know, he had just got divorced. So, you know, you get dumped or you break up, you got all kind of stuff to sing about. So that was a really great album. His new album is pretty dope as well, too. He has a decent cover of Superstar on there. One of my friends said they ain't like it at all, but I thought it was okay. But yeah, anyway, I enjoyed their music. But yeah, as far as verses, I don't know. I just think it was better when it was a little bit more scaled back. And I get it. People are going to want to branch out and make things bigger. But if you're going to do that and you're going to have the nerve to charge, then I expect a polished output. Like, I expect full band and lighting and sound check and maybe some dancers depending on who it is. Like, give me a full give me something that I'm going to pay for. Because, again, Verzuz is honestly them just kind of chatting and playing music. Honestly. And so I don't know. Sometimes people ruin a good thing. Sometimes less is more. You know what I mean? Anyway, moving on. So can we talk about the Tinder Swindler? And it's so funny. Every now and then I like my good dose of trash TV. And I was just talking to somebody the other day about my selection of shows I got to catch up on. And a whole lot of them shows are not very productive, but whatever. I got to live too. And so, by the way, there are spoilers in this segment. So if you plan on watching the Tinder Swindler and do not want it to be spoiled, please go to the description in this video, find the timestamps, and jump to the next segment. All right? That way y'all can't be cussing me out talking about I ruined it for y'all. All right, so y'all got like 5 more seconds because I'm about to start my segment. 5, 4, somebody's still running to their little device or to their TV right now to change it. All right, time is up. So I watched this. Let me just say, where do I start? First of all, anyway, the documentary is about this guy that pretty much scams all these women from Tinder. He razzles and dazzles all of them, and he pretends to be super, super rich, and all of these women are funding his very extravagant lifestyle. And then while he wines and dines these women, he's using money from other women that he's been wining and dining to wine and dine the other women, and so on and so forth. And so these people think he is like this billionaire because, depending on what he described himself as, sometimes he was like the heir to this billionaire oil family or diamond family or whatever else he said was going on, or some kind of special ambassador royalty, all kind of crazy stuff and everything. And so the craziest thing, the biggest question I had as I watched this, because I'm watching this man fly these women to London and to Denmark and Oslo and all these random places. And so when it started getting to the point where he gets into the scameration, right? And I'm making up words, yes, I know. But when he gets to the scameration, where he starts having these narratives about, oh, something happened, or my enemies are after me, I just need you to give me about $20,000 real quick. And I started watching these women actually go and do it. I'm just looking like, where are y'all getting all this money from? Like, when you saw how much money some of these women were putting into this relationship, right? One of the women, what did she say? $250,000. Another woman was like $500,000 here and there. And overall, he scammed like a whole bunch of women out of $10 million. And I'm just sitting here looking like, what kind of bank accounts do y'all have? How does the loan work where y'all take loans out? Because I know the banks that I be going to, they be looking at you sideways when you want to take out a loan. And so one woman went to the bank like 5 or 6 times, constantly taking out money. And they're adding extra credit cards and putting his name on the accounts and doing all this other stuff, messing up their credit, losing their homes, apartments, everything, putting all their trust into this man. And I'm just like, y'all didn't see the red flags? You didn't see any of them? Because for me, the minute he would have sent that post with the dude with the bloody head, that would have been my sign to get out. You know what? This is a little too much for me. You know what? Let me stick to somebody a little less engaged in whatever's going on in the world. I'm good. Like, man, the minute you would have sent me the picture of the dude with the bloody head and all that, oh, so this is how you living. Okay, and then it doesn't help that the guy, my enemies, Simon, that's his name. My enemies are after me. We must go now. What's all this we stuff? We ain't gotta go nowhere. You can go. I'm good. I don't know the way I'd be changing numbers and everything. And so it was just, let me just tell you, I probably said what like 1,000,000 times. What? Every time, like every 5 minutes. What? I stayed cussing out that TV. I know my neighbors was like, if he don't shut up over there, because every 2 seconds the woman would keep doing stupid things. What? Like, man, are y'all serious? Oh, $10 million. You know what I mean? I just. But I'll say this, the girl towards the end that finally played the game and, she took all his clothes when he hit rock bottom and then sold them all, like, that was funny to me. I'm like, at least somebody figured out how this all went. But what confused me with her was she still was in contact with the man. I was like, I would have got all the clothes and started selling everything, and that would have been it. We would have never talked again. So the fact that she sat there and let this man cuss her out and keep messaging her like, you stupid, like, absolutely not. And then he's trying to threaten people. You will severely pay. Your actions will have a reaction. All right, Simon, whatever. But no, Simon was out here scamming. He done used the same videos to all the women. All the women got the same picture of Peter getting beat up and in the hospital. Everybody got the same clip. I was like, man, the privilege that exists. The fact folks just got $250,000 to give to people. You know how frugal I am? Like, listen, the only thing I spend money on, in all honesty, because I don't like spending a whole lot of money, I will spend money on things I invest in that kind of are more so for like all my little creative passion projects. But other than that, I'll spend money on food, and the other thing I might spend money on is all them kids I work with, which is, I'm trying to not do it as often, but it's so funny. I just cave for the kids for some reason. My coworkers always fire me up because them kids be getting everything out of me. Like, I remember one time, I had rewarded like a certain amount of the kids because they did really good in school and did all these really great things. And so I took them to Dave & Buster's, right? And so mind you, this was on the company card. We get there, and I mean, I had the works laid out. They had the good package where, you got like $30, $40 worth of tokens to go and play the games, and you're going to get the food and everything. That bill was like $800 something. And then right when I get ready to swipe the company card, they done pulled the money off for some reason. I was like, what did y'all... And it's a Saturday, so the company ain't even open. And so I was like, dang, guess we ain't coming, and I guess we just can't go in. And so when I turned around and saw all them faces, and all the kids, they just looked so excited. They were all excited to be there. They had their little winter puffy coats on and everything. It's like, damn. Okay, I ain't about to tell these kids we can't do this. They've been looking forward to this day for like 3 weeks. So I ended up spending the money out of my pocket don't judge, to let the kids get Dave & Buster's. And so they were in Dave & Buster's, had a ball. They in there just swiping and playing games. I'm in Dave & Buster's shaking, just thinking about, what the fuck did you just do? Anyway, I did get my money back from the company. It got reimbursed, but still. But it's so funny because, like, even when the kids be tearing up stuff at the center and all, I'm always like, I ain't buying nothing else. When y'all break it, that's it. That's it. I told you, that's it. It is what it is. 2-3 days later, I'll be at the store. My coworker's like, what you doing? Yeah, I'm going to just go ahead and get them the whatever they, just because I don't want them to have to not have it today. They going to need it. And my whole team just be like, you are so soft with these kids. You're soft. Anyway, but yeah, the Tinder Swindler off the chain. And I read that he now has representation, and there's a talent agency that has signed him, and they want to possibly do a podcast and some other things. Yeah, a podcast about relationships. I'm like, the nerves. The privilege that exists. Folks just get to skate and do whatever they want and get rewarded. Like, even when he went to jail, what did he go to jail for? 5 months? And then went right back at it. Some new victims. Whew. All right. Interesting. I swear I yelled what to that TV so many times. I had to keep rewinding to make sure I was hearing stuff straight. Anyway, moving on. And then I see people are still cutting up on these planes. Now, I saw 2 different stories. The first story was the one about the guy that tried to open the emergency exit while the plane was 30,000+ feet in the air. And then the other story was the one about the guy who, I think he was trying to get into the cockpit, and then the flight attendant, knocked him upside the head with the coffee pot, and then the people held him down. So it's about time y'all start regulating around here, because I said that, I don't remember what video it was, but I definitely said them flight attendants act like they don't got hot coffee and stuff in the kitchen when people do the most on these planes. Like, I don't get it. I don't understand why people wait till they get on the plane and want to act a fool. Like, why you can't cut up at the TSA line or something? You want to wait till we get 30,000+ feet in the air and you want to play around. Like, I already told y'all, I don't like flying. We are too high up for shenanigans, all right? I don't want any reason for the plane to go down, so sit down. And I don't know if they're still mad about the masks or whatever, but dang, if it's that bad, just don't fly. Like, just don't fly. You gotta ruin it for everybody else. I can't stand being in a position where my livelihood is at the hands of other people collectively. I can't stand it because you ain't never gonna get nowhere. Look at how the United States responded to COVID. Man. But absolutely crazy. But then what was crazy with the one about the flight with the coffee pop, pow. The people on the flight were saying, yeah, while all of that was happening, then the plane literally almost did like a nosedive for, a certain amount of time where the plane just did like a quick descent downward. I'm like, oh. I don't know if one of them pilots was watching my videos, because I definitely said if I were one of them pilots and they want to keep doing that on the plane, I'll drop it a few thousand feet. Like, oh, y'all want to play? I thought I said sit down. Like, play around if you want to. But no, I don't like that dude. People doing too much on the planes. It's just we're too high up. You know what I mean? It's just people are already paranoid on planes. Like, I don't know. It's a lot. It's something about planes. Don't play around on the plane. I already don't like flying. I told y'all a million times. My way of staying sane on a plane is I just look at the flight attendants. As long as the flight attendants are cool, I'm cool. Because, sometimes, I know especially when I was still in undergrad, or even when my family still lived in Washington State and I was in D.C., and I'd always make that 4 or 5 hour flight from Washington to Washington. It doesn't matter how clear the skies are. As soon as you get over them Rocky Mountains, that flight gets rocky. Right? And so, the flight would just be jumping and going, and then flight attendants would just be pouring a little soda in the can, and just calm and collected, and, the whole plane, and they just, pouring, and even the cart be rolling, and I'm like, and they're just calm and collected, so I'm like, as long as they good, I'm good, cool. But no, I don't like flying. I try to not be so over the top, because when I was younger, I was perfectly fine with it, but for some reason, when I hit like 25, 26, I started becoming very observant on the planes. Like, everything paranoids me. I don't like if I can hear the engine slow down. You know how you're on the plane and you hear that little shoo, because then I'd be thinking the plane's turning off and we about to drop. I'm like, oh shoot, the plane about to turn off. I don't like sitting in the very back of the plane, because that's where you feel all the turbulence and everything like that. I don't even like to look at the window sometimes because I don't know if you pay attention, but you know, like the airplane windows, there's that tiny little dot that's like the size of the head of a pin needle, like literally. And sometimes you might see somewhat of a crack around it. I'm like, oh man, that'd be crazy if things started cracking, like, and then the window bust out or something. I don't know, I'd be in my head, but no, I'd be paranoid on the plane. It started getting too turbulent. I start changing the playlist on the iPod to gospel. Like, I'd be doing too much. But no, I need folks to stop doing the most on these planes. Like, y'all already giving these flight attendants a hard time, and you keep seeing all these flight attendants getting punched in the face and assaulted and all that. I don't get it. Now, the lady that's from Abbott Elementary, the one that plays the principal, she had me dying. I was watching some of her comedy special, one of the ones she had, and she said, oh, the reason everybody cutting up on the planes, because remember when the flights got really, really cheap when COVID first hit? And she was like, oh yeah, well that's because you got bus people on the flights now. I was like, I'm not even gonna laugh at that, but people are stupid, but okay. Anyway, let's keep moving. And so for those of you who are really into documentaries, especially the ones that tackle subjects like wealth inequality or discrimination in regards to housing, there was a really great documentary on PBS. You know, they have the Independent Lens series that they air, and that specific series has a bunch of great episodes that tackle a little bit of everything. So, you know, conversations around healthcare inequality or gaps within education and all these different things, but they had a specific episode entitled Owned: The Tale of Two Americas. And this is a conversation about just how when you have things like zoning laws and redlining, how it will play out in the end run when it comes to the residual effects, when it comes to the wealth that's created or the wealth that is lost or stolen. And if you saw my Steve Harvey video, the one that's like, nah, Steve Harvey, that's not how this works. In that video, I pretty much detail and outline how the middle class was created after World War II. And also just pretty much, you know, things like black people being left out of the GI Bill and how all of those early things that took place years ago play a role into why some things are the way they are now, especially in regards to how our cities are aligned and mapped out. But anyway, they have this great parallel in the documentary where they talk about Levittown, which is in, you know, Nassau County, New York, like Long Island. And there's another section called Mar Vista in California. Now, both of these towns were created in 1947. And so when you get to Levittown, there was this guy, William Levitt, and he wanted to create, you know, this just utopian experience of American exceptionalism and have this great suburban neighborhood and the white picket fences and, you know, everything would be top tier, the best of the best. And this would highlight to the rest of the world why America was the best and everybody could have a piece of this dream. And of course, black people, y'all were left out. We weren't in this one. So this was specifically for white Americans. And so going back to that conversation about black people being left out of the GI Bill, at this point in time in 1947, in the place of Levittown, when it came to purchasing the homes, for some people who had the GI Bill, literally you only had to pay $100 down and $99 a month for your home, right? And so even when you fast forward to modern times, Levittown is still 95% white. And so initially, of course, there were covenants there where it pretty much stated black people were not allowed to live there, period. So then on the flip side, you have Mar Vista in California, and this is also 1947, and this was another brainchild of another man who wanted to create like this utopian experience of how, you know, the modern American would live in the future and how we would kind of make the houses work for us so that they wouldn't be so raggedy and fall apart after 30 years without maintenance and flipping and everything else like that. And so this was going to be an area that was specifically for 100 residents. However, this was going to be an integrated neighborhood. This wasn't going to be a red line neighborhood, and because of that, the Federal Housing Authority, or FHA, decided that they could not insure Mar Vista because they felt that integrated neighborhoods would bring the value of the homes down and they wouldn't be worth anything when it was time to resell. So only 52 out of the 100 units ended up being constructed, and so the neighborhood never really got completed. And so the documentary just does a great job of talking about just the discrepancies that took place. They highlight the fact that Baltimore, of course, we know is the city where zoning laws first started back in 1910, and that also led to covenants. And I definitely recommend two books. The main book is The Color of Law, and I think we've talked about it a few times, but The Color of Law is a great book that literally goes from city to city, explaining how these cities were mapped out and what these covenants meant, and how they were able to outline different policy and different laws to ensure that certain groups of people would not be able to benefit from, you know, what was out there. And again, these conversations play a role as to why we have the wealth gap that we have today. Another book that I would recommend is The Color of Money as well, and when it talks about just what happens in regards to banking and so on and so forth, and the idea of building wealth. And so there are so many layers, so many. And even the fact that when they did pass the Fair Housing Act in 1968, it was never federally enforced. And it was kind of something that was kind of left up to the states and the local governments. And so they could just do whatever they want. So even in modern times, there are still discriminatory practices. I don't remember what In the News it is because we've done so many of these, but I definitely did a whole story about specifically Long Island and how, you know, there was this entire investigative report as to how you had all these realtors who were not selling to black people on purpose. And, you know, so again, you still have elements of that idea of redlining that still exists today. And we've had the conversations about how the freeway systems were built, and a lot of times they demolished entire black neighborhoods in order to create the freeway systems and so on and so forth. And so there's so many layers in this conversation. I would love to maybe, I know we have the book club, but I would love to maybe have a separate kind of Zoom party to kind of have some of these kind of discussions as well. That would be really cool. I'll figure that out later. But anyway, it's a really great watch, so definitely check it out. Again, it's called Own, The Tale of Two Americas, and it's under the Independent Lens series. I think you can watch it online if you don't have PBS. And I know PBS always does the reruns. I don't know when it comes back on, but it was a really great watch, very informative. And that's just the portion that I covered. They also cover other things like, you know, the conversation around like the Bronx burning and how you had a lot of landlords just burning down their properties and collecting the insurance money and so on and so forth, and just highlighting the fact that when you divest from a neighborhood, you pull out the resources, you get rid of everything, what do you expect to happen over time when there's nothing for the residents to look forward to? I wish I could remember the name of the other documentary I recommended a while back. It's about the housing project that was in Atlanta. I want to say, dang, I can't think of what it's called, but that's a really, really great one as well. If I can remember what it's called, I'll write it in the description as well. But that's a really good watch as well. It's also very detailed because it's specifically just about that housing project and how, of course, the city of Atlanta had all of these things that they were going to do for the people, and when it was all said and done, people ain't got half of what was supposed to happen. You know how politics work in this country. Anyway, moving on. And then when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, I'll be transparent, I have not 100% followed each and every detail that's being reported out of that region, mainly because whenever there's a situation where the United States has smoke with some other country, the information starts to get real sketchy. And you can't even really decipher between what is actually true and what's more so something that's being presented to you to get you online or on board with what the U.S. may be wanting to do internationally when it comes to military action. And so I say that because I think back to what happened in 2003 with Iraq. And so as everything was building up, you started to see how the media would often report about Saddam Hussein in Iraq, like literally every single day. That would be the first headline you see probably from about December of 2002 until March of 2003 when we went into Iraq. And then you started seeing those commercials come on. And remember, it would always be the commercial where they have the white woman with the really, really soft voice. And so she'd have that, it would be the commercial where she's speaking from the perspective of the people who live in Iraq. And so when you hear the commercial, you hear the woman talking about Saddam Hussein, and it's, he's a dictator, he's ruthless, he's cold-blooded, please America, please come and help us. And you know, and then the next thing, please call your senator, tell them to vote yes. And so, you know, they did all of that to kind of paint the narrative and the weapons of mass destruction and all of this and everything. And then we go over there and it's chaos. It's a disaster. In my opinion, Iraq is worse off than before we went over there. And the thing that they did not really talk about in the media as they were pushing for, you know, Americans to get behind this war that somehow was going to justify a reaction in regards to what happened to 9/11, which was totally unrelated. Like the situations weren't even correlating together. It's just, oh, well, they in the same region, so somebody guilty. But anyway, you know, there was no conversation about the fact that at the time Iraq was in a civil war, and if the United States were to go over there and destabilize what was already over there, it was going to be even more chaotic because you have these different ethnic groups that are all fighting for power in regards to what's happening in the country of Iraq regionally. When you talk about what's happening in the north versus the south or the mid regions, and like there was so much happening, and the U.S. was like, well, we don't care about none of that. We going over there to get Saddam out because Bush said that's what we gonna go do. We gonna blow that stuff up, and it's gonna be American freedom over there, because that was the other thing. They pushed the narrative of, you know, Operation Enduring Iraqi Freedom. We were going to go and free the people from Saddam, and when we got him out of there, it was going to be the best thing ever, and the people would have freedom. And so we went over there, blew up everything, destroyed everything, and like Iraq, it's going to be decades before they can get into a place where they can recover from everything that happened over there. And, you know, it's kind of like, my thing is this, as far as what's happening over there in Ukraine, Joe, we ain't got time for it over here. I'm not trying to be that person, but there are enough issues in the United States at the moment that need to be taken care of. And it's so funny how there's never any money for the things that the people need. All the things that the people actually want, Congress can never agree to vote or push anything through that Build Back Better, forget about it. They couldn't even get that through. And, the conversations around, the high prices of education and how it's just outrageous, and the conversations around healthcare, the conversations around adequate housing, and even water quality. I'll give this current administration kudos for, doing what they're doing with the pipelines in certain cities, trying to get rid of the lead pipes and so on and so forth. But, for all of the flaws and the things that exist, why are we always the first in line to go start and get ready to jump into some military action? Anytime it's almost time for war, the check is ready. Hit blank check, how much you need. And then the defense contracting companies, they start, writing up the big proposals, and there's these multi-billion-dollar deals for, arms and weapons and all this other stuff. And I'm just like, how many times are we going to compete or continue to do the same cycle? And so for me, it's like, Joe, now we got enough going on over here, man. And I get it. I know there's conversations around international law and Article 5 in regards to NATO, and we know, yes, Ukraine is not technically in NATO, but they had plans to join NATO, and Putin is feeling like, well, if Ukraine joins NATO, now it's like I got all these people against me, and so everybody got smoke for each other. My thing is, listen, in my opinion, military action is not an option. Y'all better find a way. You better use some words. Y'all better figure out some kind of collaborative economic deal, something. Do not go and send all them kids over there to go die for something that has nothing to do with their freedom over here. Because y'all keep going and sending these 19 and 20 and 22-year-olds over there to go and kill some random people that they don't even know. Like, imagine the idea of going to war where you have smoke for somebody that you don't even know, and they got smoke for you and they don't know you either. Y'all are both just told that you're enemies because your governments don't get along. And so the big wigs up top who are making the decisions tell you to go and put your life on the line. And a lot of times people that go and sign up for this, they're not doing it because they want to go and protect the country or they want to fight for freedom. They're just looking for financial stability. They're just trying to make the best out of what they have, because it's no secret that when you see where the recruiters go, the recruiters are not going to the rich high schools. They're going to the working class high schools. They're going to the high schools in the suburbs, in the rural towns, in the places where, depending on what the situation is for the parents or the families in which some of these kids come from, there's not a lot of options. So the military is the saving grace. I've told you guys the experience for both of my parents. That was their saving grace at the time. The idea, for my father, who didn't even get to finish high school, military was his option. Same thing with my mom. She got to finish high school, but there was no money for school. Military was her option. And so they take advantage of people who don't have the means to support themselves based on whatever their situation is, and then you send them over there to go and die. And if they don't die, they come back all broke up or got PTSD, got all kind of conditions, and then you don't even take care of them when you're over here, because the same leaders in Congress that vote to send people over there won't even pass certain bills to ensure that the people that went over there are taken care of. So stuff like that doesn't sit well in my spirit. And so in addition to that, it's just like, for all of the things happening right now, why do we keep sending people over there? But just imagine that, the idea of going to war where you go and you fight somebody you don't even know just because somebody, you've been ordered to do so. And so the people are always collateral to the decisions of the people up top. And so my thing is like, Joe, Putin, if all y'all got smoke for each other, y'all go lock yourselves in a room with a hammer and y'all duke it out. And y'all just tell us how it went, all right? Don't bring all of us into that nonsense. And I'm not trying to be that person, but Joe, you're already on borrowed time. There is no guarantee that if we jump into some military action and jump into a full-scale war, there's no guarantee that you will even live to see the end of what happens. And I'm not trying to kill somebody off just because he's older, but the man is 79. Don't you dare start a war that you ain't gonna be around for when it ends. You know what I mean? Because I keep seeing all the press conferences and there will be severe distance. You using a lot of fighting words for somebody that's not gonna be going over there to do nothing. That's all I'm saying. Like, I get it. Putin is not really, the best example of leadership, in my opinion. He got a whole lot of nonsense as well. But dang it, y'all better figure it out, because we got enough flaws over here as well. You see I was about to cuss, the S-word show of people in power that we got in all these different states and local governments right now with all the chaos going on. We're one to talk. But I'm over it, because again, a lot of times they'll paint the narrative of, we're going over there because we want to make sure that people have freedom and they have a choice in democracy. But it seems like every time we go to some of these countries and go help, they end up worse off. Like, look what we did to Argentina as far as destabilizing their government and taking out their leaders. Or look what we did in Panama or in Grenada or in all of these countries where we keep going and invading or doing whatever. Sometimes it's not even invading. Sometimes it's actual policy and law. Like, look at what happened with Haiti. I talked about it on one of the lives, but one of the reasons Haiti is dealing with what they deal with, in addition to what France has been doing as far as them trying to collect the reparations for all those years, I think they don't have to pay. I think that's over with at this point, but still the damage has been done. The U.S. played a major role in regards to the banking in Haiti. So it's like, all these countries end up worse off. And as kids, we're taught that, hey, well, even when we go and blow up all these countries, we rebuild them. When in reality, they don't tell you that what we rebuild is just the things that benefit American interests. So yeah, you blow up everything in the country and they get a KFC and they get a Subway. Okay, but you're not rebuilding their universities. You're not rebuilding their hospital. You rebuilding all the stuff that's going to bring some extra money to the U.S. Like, that's the kind of nonsense I be talking about. And so in my opinion, I just feel like they're going to have to figure something out. I understand it's tense, but even Ukraine is like, U.S., we need y'all to just chill a little bit. Like, it could get there, but we're not there yet. So can y'all slow down? Because every time you turn around, the first news story you hear when you turn it on is what's happening with Putin and what he's doing and Man, nobody's trying to be in war. Like, I can guarantee you, no U.S. citizens want to go to war at the moment. And I can probably guarantee you, even the people in Russia ain't really trying to start no fights. They just got to do what they're told to do. The same thing with the people in Ukraine. That's how politics work when you have world leaders that are all corrupt anyway. But, the thing that I'll say is, like, I'm just convinced, like, all of these wars, half the time, they have nothing to do with freedom for anybody. And in my personal opinion, the United States, I don't think a single war we fought, probably since the Civil War, has had anything to do with freedom in the United States, in my personal opinion. Some may say maybe almost World War I, and I think that's even a stretch. And even when you learned about World War I in school, they never really told you how we got in it. You just opened a history book and they said, in 1914, the U.S. and Germany and all these countries were at war until 1918. They never really give you the full scoop or nothing. They just showed up, you opened the book, and we was blowing up stuff, and folks was in the trenches. But, like, when you look at, like, I guess the origins of what would have technically started that war, and these are usually the things they don't teach us. They might teach you that, there was a situation where Germany invaded Belgium, and the people of Belgium needed our help to ensure that they had freedom. And so that sometimes might be in your history book as far as how you were taught. Or they might also talk about the Zimmerman telegram, where it was discovered that, like, Mexico and Germany had an agreement because they were allies. And so the deal was, like, pretty much, well, if the United States joins the war and loses, don't worry, Mexico, we will make sure that you get to annex New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona. And so that probably is one of the things that's taught, and it's taught like, oh yeah, that was a threat to our freedom because there were 3 states that were at risk. And I'm like, well, we already stole them states anyway, not to be rude, and we stole that from Mexico to begin with. It would have just been giving them back what we stole. But you know what they never quite talk. Oh, and they'll throw in the Lusitania, that ship that like got sunk in like 1915. They'll throw that into the mix. But you know what they never talk about? They never talk about the fact that many U.S. banks had given really huge loans to all of our allies in Europe. And so once it started to sink in that if the allies lost, the banks would not make their money back, and they'd also actually lose a lot of money, and it would play a role into the U.S. economy. It was like, wait a minute, they need to win this war so we can get, our money back plus interest. And next thing you know, here comes the U.S. We all up in there blowing up stuff. That's all I'm saying. But then, when you look at all of the wars that followed, probably from the 1950s until the 80s, the narrative around any reason why we had to go to war was something about communism and the socialists. We got to stop the communists. And so, Iraq and Iran, even though we gave both of them weapons at the same time while they were fighting each other, somehow that had something to do with our freedom because of communism. And, we went over there and did whatever we did with Afghanistan. And, all the Korean War had something to do with communism. We got to stop the communism and the Vietnam and all these different things, and you have all these American citizens die literally in vain, in my opinion, just because again, the leaders up top are just doing any and everything or whatever whatever's in their power to do amongst themselves with their own policy. The people got to be collateral. I'm not down with that. And I don't know what they doing, but you use y'all words. Y'all better figure it out. You better send somebody an edible arrangement, a muffin basket or something. Do not bring us into a war, Joe, because you won't be here for it to end. I'm not trying to kill you off or nothing, but nah, man, absolutely not. Jeez. Every time I turn around, we be the first one ready to blow up something. Every time. They be, what we gotta burn down around here? Goodness. Hey, it's kind of like those movies where you see those like cop movies where they're going after the bad guy. And it's a guy that they're going after because, I don't know, it's a drug kingpin type person. And they go through the speed chase and they destroy all the downtown where they drive. And they drive the car through the mall and they destroy a building and blow up this and blow up the marina and blow up a dock. And the whole skyscraper collapses and the subway system collapses within itself. And then the gas lines are set on fire and the whole city burns. And then at the end of the movie, the boss is fussing at him. You destroyed this and $3 million in damage, but you got the job done. Good work. That's how we look every time we go to war. Like any other country at this point, you should have common sense. If the United States says they want to help y'all, we good. We'll put you as like a back option. Let us work it out amongst ourselves first before we come in, because once the U.S. gets in there, it's going down. Everything getting blown up. Just I hope they're able to figure something out. Like, because That's the last thing the U.S. needs right now. And I think people need to also remember that a lot of these countries, the economies are all interconnected and interdependent. And one of the fears that some people have in regards to if there was a call for military action with the United States and Russia is, where does China fall into all of this? And even where does North Korea fall into all this? Now, I don't think North Korea is that pressed, but, they might jump in for some laughs and giggles. But think about the fact that, especially with Russia and China, and specifically China, our economies are intertwined. And so a full-scale war with all of these different countries, and then you throw in the European nations or the European Union in that mix and everything else like that, you're pretty much talking about the S-word show in regards to everybody's economy. If you think people are struggling now, let things start going terribly in that realm. So I am hopeful that they can figure it out, but don't bring us into no nonsense. Don't do it. Not right now. Just don't do it at all right, y'all? Do something else, man. Dang. Send them a card or something. Y'all figure it out. I'm over this. Every single time. You got all these things happening. The school's falling apart. They ain't got no good ventilation and everything else like that. And here we go, about to blow up some stuff. Always got a check ready for war. And then it's being reported that Loretta Lynch is going to represent the NFL in regards to the lawsuit brought on by Brian Flores, which highlights the fact that he feels that the NFL has a very racist practice when it comes to hiring. And this is why you're not seeing a lot of black owners or black coaches or black people in positions of power other than them being the athletes that play on the field. And so when I first read this, and if you remember, she was the attorney general or the second attorney general under the Obama administration. And so when I first read this, I thought I read it wrong. I thought it was saying that she was representing Brian Flores. I was like, oh, okay, cool, nice. And then when I saw, no, she's representing the NFL. And I said, okay. Now, mind you, this is a conversation about racial discrimination. So imagine as a black individual, you go and you represent the organization or the corporation that's being accused of the discrimination. And for me, I understand people have a job, but there's also a thing of integrity. And even from her own experience, she can't even pretend and deny that something like racism does not exist at these higher levels. The fact that even when she was nominated to become Attorney General, it took 13 months to get her confirmed. And so for you to go and sign on to represent the NFL, and the NFL has so many layers of things that they can catch smoke for. It's bigger than just the lawsuit by Brian Flores. It's bigger than the kneeling and what happened with Colin Kaepernick. Even when you talk about the race norming that they had to halt in regards to the concussion payouts and all of the different settlements that they've had to make. And just, there's so many things that could be said in regards to what the NFL does that to me is offensive to the black collective and is detrimental. And so for you to sign on to represent that just means that in the long run, when it goes down in history, you had an opportunity to change the status quo, to open more doors, and in reality, you're going to be somebody that's seen as being in the way. And I was disappointed when I read that. It's funny, NFL can't ever find no black coaches or nothing, but they found a black lawyer real quick. All right. We just gonna have to start Black History Month over and extend it into March, because February has been off the chain. And now if you live in my world, I celebrate Black History all year. It's just an ongoing thing around these parts. However, because there is a designated time and allotted space for this kind of celebration, fine, we're gonna have to extend it into March, because February, I don't know, y'all. I have yet to. Every time I turn around, it's some kind of crazy story. So I was reading the story about Eric Adams out of New York, the recently elected mayor. And so, he wants to ban drill music because he feels that is the reason why there has been a spike in crime. And so this is a very layered conversation. And I think multiple things can be true at once. But I will say this, in regards to music, his approach to me is very 1992. Politicians have already gone this route. Like, we remember what happened with like a 2 Live Crew or NWA when you came out of the 80s and went into the 90s. You saw all of these people in power trying to kind of silence different entertainers and artists because they felt that their music and their art was too vulgar or too explicit or too, it promoted all these different things. And so here's my beef. For me, that's a very old talking point, and a lot of times whenever something happens, the first thing people will go and do is blame like the entertainers and the music. But if you're going to have a conversation about the increase in crime, especially within black communities and black neighborhoods, then how come we never address the initial origins of what creates an environment for the crime to exist? Everybody goes after the end result in everything. And so for the mayor to spend all his time blaming these these rappers about their music, and you guys are the reason why, you know, kids are going and doing whatever, or people are on the train or doing whatever, or people who have, you know, homeless people on the street who have mental issues and addiction issues are attacking people on the street. It's because of y'all music. You know, it's kind of like, please go back to the origins. Please look at the conversations in history in regards to the flaws that exist within our education. Like, you realize New York City is the most segregated school system in the country, right? Yes, very liberal New York City, the most segregated school district in the country. By the way, I talked about it before. There's a really great podcast called Nice White Parents that kind of highlights just the history of education or public education in New York City. Very entertaining listen. It's about 5 or 6 episodes. It will kind of, you will never look at things the same way again when you talk about people who claim to be allies, but once it comes down to where their kids get to go to school, all that goes out the window. But the conversations in education, the conversations in healthcare, the fact that a lot of these places don't even have recreation for people who are idle and need things to do, the fact that the job markets in some of these areas freaking suck. And even when we talk about jobs, when you talk about the prison industrial complex and the judicial system, when people get out, sometimes there's not the best options in regards to people that are trying to build their life back. You know, the conversations around the infrastructure in certain segments of town, the conversation around the fact that there's just, you know, there's so many things that you could dig into. And that's just, in that aspect, even the conversation of gentrification, all right? There's been some really great research I've been looking at where it's showing that in a lot of these cities that are being gentrified, crime is actually going up. And why? It's because literally you're almost building a new city on top of the city that was already there, but it doesn't include the people that were already there. And so the people that are watching their cultural institutions be replaced by, you know, a whole bunch of different franchises and a yoga gym or whatever else, they're watching their entire world be chipped away, and they're not included or invited to be a part of that world, and they're seen as a nuisance. And so then there's more punitive policy that's written to kind of keep people in their place so they don't mess up what's already going for the new changes that are taking place. So when you look at a lot of cities, like even DC, crime has been going up even before COVID. Same thing with a place like New York. Same thing with a place like Atlanta. Crime has been going up in the places where you have heavy gentrification, because in some of these regions, gentrification has now reached a threshold where it has a larger impact on the people that, you know, were once there, where you literally watching entire demographics of cities change within 10 years. Look at the demographics of how much DC has changed over the time. DC is far from Chocolate City now. And so that's just that piece. And then the other smoke you should have, because for me, yes, you have entertainers that make music about all kind of crazy things I have to side eye on occasion, but the entertainers are one piece of the pie. If you want to have that kind of smoke, you're going to have to go after the whole oven, because honestly, you know, we're now in a space where there is a status quo for a lot of these rappers, where if you want to have commercial success, if you want to have any kind of viability, there are only so many things that you are allowed to talk about. You're going to have to talk about selling drugs or killing somebody or something misogynistic or something off the chain, because that's what the industry allows in regards to access to success. You know what I mean? Radio programmers are not going to play the positive artists, because the industry has set it up now where that is not the cool thing to invest in. And mind you, a lot of these radio stations already have nationally syndicated playlists that come from the top down. And so take that energy to the people in those executive offices. Take that smoke to the record labels that choose to only sign certain kinds of artists that only talk about certain kinds of subject matter. And then the artists that do things that are positive or more uplifting or more insightful, they kind of push out or don't push, or they don't promote one. So even when you talk about the women in hip hop, there's a reason why somebody like a Rhapsody is not as big as she could be. I think she's probably one of the dopest lyricists out there right now, but you're not seeing her being pushed because there is a certain image that the industry wants to push and allow. And so it doesn't allow for access for other entertainers to branch out and really experiment creatively, because they only want to keep a certain lane that's out there that they deem is marketable. And right now, what is deemed marketable by these people in these offices is violence, hyper-sexualized entertainers, so on and so forth. And so if you want to have smoke for these rappers who are in these slave contracts where, you know, they finally done got the option to live their dream, but you're going to have to play the role or you're not going to be pushed, okay, you can have the smoke for them. And I do believe there is an element of responsibility. If you are somebody who represents the community and they're looking up to you, you're going to have to ensure that you are doing, you know, what it is in your power to ensure that you're not leading your people astray. However, recognize that a lot of the people in the industry are puppets to a larger system. Where, again, and this is a conversation about money and everything else as well, where a lot of these rappers have to play the game or they might as well kiss their livelihood goodbye. I'm not giving a pass to endorsing violence or endorsing the idea of encouraging people to sell drugs, but even the conversation of selling drugs. Let's talk about what leads to the conditions where people have to make that decision. Imagine the idea of you live in a space where the job market sucks, and so the few jobs you do get, you barely making enough to even pay your bills, and you see somebody selling whatever, and they driving the nicest car on the block, and the money is just, what I gotta do? That's it? Oh, yeah. Let me reevaluate some things. Like, that's people's reality. And so I just think he has a very, very dated approach. The whole idea of blaming the rappers, if you want to do that, just recognize that multiple things can be true at once. So if that's what you want to start with, then you're going to have to peel back and unfold the layers, because they are the end result of a larger origin. So I need us to go to the origin. Everybody always goes to the end result of everything, and then the end result becomes the face of the blame. Like, that's something I'm not down with. It's kind of like the conversations of when people start talking about wealth inequality, and they say, well, black people are where they're at because they're lazy and blah, 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 blah. And they ignore everything in history. They ignore even the policy that's still in place. They ignore the covenants and the ordinances and everything that's still affecting us today. All of that is done. People who've lost their land, you know what I mean? Everything that you've seen happen to the Gullah Geechee community, and how all of that Hilton Head property is now golf courses. All the people have lost their land. There's nobody talks about the conversations of how the government utilized heirs land to pretty much take so much property from black families that had land left to them. But the conversation around heirs land, or what we've talked about in regards to even black farmers and how they've literally lost almost all of their farmland, like literally 90+% of it, to the point where you had the conversation about black farmers not being eligible for USDA loans. And that even ties to the idea of heirs land, because with heirs land, you're not eligible for a lot of these programs. Like, there's so many layers in regards to why people are in the conditions that they're in, but nobody ever goes after the origin. They only want to talk about the end result and then try to act like it must have been something you did. So yes, if you want to have a conversation about the music, I'm down for it, but that's not the sole reason why there's things taking place. In addition to the fact that nothing is normal right now. Crime is up everywhere, and with the pandemic that kicked in and how everybody's lives have changed, and with everything taking place, you want to go after the rappers. I think, what? I guess, whatever. Like I said, I always told y'all, be mindful of black faces in high spaces, because some people just play the role so they can climb, but the integrity is out of the window, and a lot of people are not for the advancement of a collective. A lot of them are playing the role so that they can get into white spaces and have proximity into whiteness and what it is that they have, because there's a conversation about prosperity on an individual level, not from a collective standpoint. And so you're seeing a lot of people who are elected leaders, but they're in it for themselves. They're in it for their ego. They're in it for their specific interests, not specifically collectives. And the other issue is sometimes when people do get into office, and they mean well, by the time they get into office, they're already bought out. They've already sold out their communities. And so they play the role. They do the talking points. You know what I mean? Let's extend Black History Month into June. We just going to go until June. And then, it's going to still continue. But that's going to be a lot of time. We're going to have to go back and dig into history, because folks out here losing their minds. Hot mess. And some folks were asking me if I saw that viral video of the two teenagers fighting at the Bridgewater Mall. It's a clip where you have a white teenager and a black teenager. They get into some kind of argument. They start pushing and shoving, and then they get into an actual fight. They start throwing hands, start wrecking, knocking seats over and everything like that. Now, mind you, the setup of this environment, there's the black kid and the white kid, and everybody else in there is white. So it's just this black kid in this space. So he's the only one at that moment. And so they're having this fight. The police come in, and when the police come in, they pretty much detain and arrest the black kid. And when you see the video, at the time that the police come in, the white kid is on top of the black kid. The black kid's already on the ground. The police that kid gets pushed off the top out of the way. They cuff the black kid. And then, and that's pretty much what makes the video go viral, because people are saying this is a prime example of the racial bias that exists within policing, where automatically the police see a scuffle and they assume, well, it must be because this kid must be doing something to that kid, so let's go ahead and take this kid down. And so it reminds me of one of the things my parents used to always tell me, because again, I grew up in a town called Spanaway, Washington, which wasn't always the most diverse town. There would be moments where you'd be the only one sometimes. And so my parents always used to tell me, in those moments where you're the only one, and really try to not be in environments where that's your experience, but just recognize that if you're in a space where you're the only one, all eyes are going to be on you. So be very careful, because if something goes down, you're going to be the one they make an example out of. Even those people that you might believe are your friends, when everything hits the fan, when the water gets hot, they're not giving up their livelihood to protect you. If anything, you're going to be the one thrown under the bus. So just kind of be careful, because even in that video, what's so interesting, you watching all these little white kids just use the N-word and everything too. They just throwing it around. I was like, folks use this word so much. But So white kids, throwing the N-word around, this, that, and the third. But none of these kids tell the police officers, hey, this is an equally yoked thing. Because normally when there's a fight or something, the police go and get everybody. Like if there's like a domestic disturbance, most of the time, the police, they arresting everybody. Everybody getting arrested. But in this case, they only go after the black kid. And so you don't hear any of those friends in that video say, hey, officer, this, that, and the third. Everybody's silent. Minus just throwing some more N-word around. I'm just like, whoa, okay. And then using all the nice little terminologies that they've learned from Twitter or whatever else. And it's like, wow, all right, well, y'all some fake friends around here because ain't nobody got his back, I see. And so, interesting. We'll see how that unfolds. There's some groups calling for those police officers to be terminated. But again, it just reflects where we are in America, where, again, you're seeing the flaws that exist. And there's different things that have been almost ingrained in people with how they see folks. And this is why I've talked about it so many times, so I'm not going to do it on this video, but these conversations around what's being censored in education in regards to conversations around race, and how you have school districts where the people can opt out of Black History Month curriculums and the CRT laws and this law here and this person can't feel uncomfortable and all this different stuff like that. When you strip all of that out of the common, like the lexicon in our discourse, and the narratives, and you strip away all of the history because we want to be so post-racial and pretend that the founding fathers were great people, and that American exceptionalism is just so great, you get into this space where so many people are so far removed from reality that the way that they operate is from such a lens that is not even relatable to the average everyday person, because everything is through a lens of whiteness. And so even when folks are in the wrong and doing wrong amongst other people, they think they're in the right because that's what they've been taught. So again, when you sit here and censor, history and try to change stuff around because you want to fit a narrative, because you don't want to feel bad about your lineage, this is the end result. Anyway, this has been a very long video. I hate to end on such a sour note. I told myself I'd try to end these on a more happier note. I guess the only happy thing I could say is for those who are in the book club, we will definitely do the next segment. It's going to be on, I gotta make sure I have it right here. The next one is going to be on March 7th, all right? That'll be 9 o'clock Eastern time. It's normally on Zoom. So again, the book that we were finishing, let's see, I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness. And so that's the book we're finishing. It was actually a really quick read, though. I didn't realize it was going to be this quick. I would have did a different book, but it is what it is. So I guess that's good news, I think. But anyway, I'm out. Share your 2 cents. Subscribe.
We reached that point again, and there's no questioning. There's no other feeling better than this. You're special, don't you ever change a thing. Don't change a thing, my blooming flower. We have no sense of time, it's amazing. For the moment, create